every norm, every institution that we once thought we could rely on has thrown out. I mean, the idea of using state and local prosecutors to go after a former president of the United States, it's mind-boggling. Out the window. Nothing matters.
I am just astonished, frankly, at what I'm seeing around the world. So I want to talk to you about that part of the news and about Israel. We can also talk about Donald Trump. You are a lawyer with the campaign.
Right.
So we can talk about President Trump. But let's start with, what is happening in the world right now with regard to Israel.
I think we're actually having a different conversation on this topic than we would have had even last week. Last week was Violent Demonstration Week. This week is sort of a new normal, one of our many new normals that we go through, I think. What we're seeing is that there's inevitably this, it's really a Muslim street more than an Arab street. They used to talk about the Arab street, but these demonstrators are from all over the place. They do share the fact that they're Muslims. Many of them are Palestinians, however. Here in New York, it's gotten actually hairy. I mean, it's amazing that you managed to find a Jew in New York to have this discussion with you, but the neighborhoods where there are tons of us, including my children and grandchildren in Borough Park, have been getting visits from some of the protesters. No one's particularly worried about his safety in these neighborhoods, but the general trend here is the Jews are being used as sort of a leading edge in what seems to be almost a systematic program. Some people are absolutely positive that it's planned to create a new level of acceptance and presence for radicalism, and especially as expressed in violent conduct.
Yep.
And the thing that blows my mind is that as extreme as people's nastiest comments might be, we wouldn't be feeling any sort of crisis mentality if it weren't for the fact that there's been this toleration of violence from the left that has been absolutely rubber-stamped. They may as well just put it on letterhead at the White House. I mean, after that demonstration at the White House where they arrested one person, and then the demonstration at the DNC, one person, whereas at J6, if you thought about the Capitol on January 6th, the FBI is going to be knocking on your door. The violence that has been elevated to the level of tolerance,
Yeah.
Tolerated.
What we're talking about, we have to say it. I have to say it. Ladies and gentlemen, we've never seen anything like this in America. This is satanic evil. There's no other word for it. I have a friend who's in solitary confinement because he was there at the Capitol on January 6th. To say he did nothing, this man is an American hero. He did nothing, and he is in solitary confinement. That is in America. That is so sick. It is very difficult for me to process that is happening in America. And when you then juxtapose that with the idea that we have thugs, radicals, violent people not being touched, that's when your average person gets angry and they say, you know what? If you were just sort of fair, we understand there are different narratives, different points of view, but what we're seeing right now seems to be spitting in the face of Lady Liberty and Uncle Sam. It seems to be a kind of injustice unlike anything we have seen in our history. Absolutely never in our history.
And it's not the savages who are doing the spitting, because who cares? Who cares? We expect savages to act.
Yeah, no, it's Joe Biden.
Exactly.
And his attorney general, or I don't know who's in there right now, but it is a dramatic contempt for America, for the founding principles, for the Constitution. We've never seen anything like it.
And the fact is that the immediate concern is for Jews and the safety of Jews, and of course on the college campuses it's outrageous what's going on. But the Jews, I hate to ring in, a cliche, but the canaries in the coal mine, when they're going after the Jews, they're eventually going after everyone listening to this discussion.
Yeah.
Because we're the same. We stand for a set of ethics and a way of going about life and a certain set of civic values that are simply not shared by these people. And I don't know, as a lawyer, in fact, how to deal with it. And I've had this discussion with a lot of conservatives. The First Amendment is for everyone. Even those who say, I reject the values of the First Amendment. But at what point do we say that it's an existential threat to the First Amendment? Ironically, the rounding up of the J6 world, I won't even say defendants, has been rationalized by precisely that kind of reasoning.
Right.
That's the problem here.
Right. Well, and again, it's a lie. I will say it. We've said it on this program
Of course.
before. The whole J6 narrative is a lie. It is so evil that it is hard to process that in America, some people created this situation. It is so wicked. It is right out of the Third Reich playbook.
How
It
about
is the
those
kind of
videos?
thing-
Yep, the videos that came out yesterday.
Okay, so the videos came out thanks to the godsend known as Speaker Johnson, which kind of makes me ask the question, what about that bum, Kevin McCarthy? Kevin McCarthy is a bum. It's amazing to me that there are people languishing, friends of mine, in prison cells, and that you have somebody saying, I'm not going to release this. It is utterly wicked. It is so wicked. Again, it's hard for us to process that this is happening in America.
And I think the problem that we have is that ideas and principles matter to us, and we find it hard to believe that we know that there have always been gangsters. There have always been people whose only interest is their own personal gain, whether it's power or money or other kinds of gratification, ungodly gratification. We just never thought that they would be getting to make the rules. And consistently, yes, there's always been corruption. There have always been
Right.
uneven, bumpy aspects to all the systems, but
right.
it has been so institutionalized on so many levels. It's a big concern.
We're in. I say that we're in the third existential crisis of our national history. The first was the Revolution. The second was the Civil War. We are now in the third existential crisis.
When did it begin?
And well, I feel like you could either say it has no real beginning. I mean, it began with stealing the election by Joe Biden, but you could go backwards. It began when Trump came down the escalator. It began. These people have always been there, but they have not felt free to take their masks off and to actually behave this way until much more recently. But we are now seeing a brazenness that we've simply never seen before.
And it's the brazenness that comes with, we know that you know, and you also know you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I think it's an arbitrary point, and you write a lot about history, to decide when this began. Speaking to James Lindsay, for example, he considers this all basically part of Marxist infiltration.
Well, that's the point. Is like, where do you start? I mean, I would start in the Garden of Eden, frankly. That's
Well,
where
that's
it began.
exactly
But I mean,
right.
there's no way to, do you go back to the French Revolution?
Right.
When do you go back to? This has been something that we've seen in history. But the fact is that even though these forces existed in this country, they've never been so open. They've never been so encouraged and brazen.
And somehow Trump gave them the license to
Oh,
open
Trump
that.
is Hitler 2.0. Folks, I'm talking to Ron Coleman. We have to talk about this. Trump is an outsider. That's the threat. That's at the heart of it. We'll be right back. Folks, I hate to interrupt, but I just don't want you to miss any of the content we're putting out on here. We've just got some amazing stuff. So would you do yourself a favor and hit the subscribe button so we can make sure you don't miss anything? I promise you, great stuff coming up. Hit the subscribe button. Thank you. You just said Trump is an outsider, and that's the point, that he scares the insiders to death. because he's not playing ball. He's just, "Oh, I love America and let's try to do things right." And he never got the memo like, no, you don't do that. You don't move the embassy to Jerusalem. Shut up.
You promised to do it.
Say you'll do it, but don't,
Right.
for God's sake, you don't actually do it. And you don't build an actual wall, and you don't ask questions, and you don't say those things about Hillary Clinton. You just don't do that. And he thought, well, I wasn't raised to not do that, so I'm going to do that. And they just went scorched earth on him to where they created the J6 lie to imprison and threaten and intimidate anybody who dares to dissent. We are in an existential war. And Donald Trump, whether inadvertently or advertently, he is the voice of those people who love America and who want justice.
There is an extraordinary commitment to Donald Trump among people that I encounter, to the point where people have gotten, I think, a little bit overboard. The suggestion that to think that perhaps Ronald DeSantis might be a better candidate is some sort of, treason to America, to the Constitution, to the Lord. All right, listen, reasonable men can disagree.
Right.
But he really, it's an extraordinary thing. I mean, he is really an absolutely historical figure for us to live during this time. And people I absolutely underestimated him. I didn't think that he had the sophistication and the ability that he did end up having, and that I saw on display. I was, like a lot of people, disappointed on some of the follow-through. And look, you're coming down from New York. You've been in the real estate business your whole life. Sure, you've got some experience with Hollywood, but Washington is a different universe altogether.
Sure.
And he made a mistake that any, again, reasonable person would make, of saying, okay, well, I'm the Republican president, so I'll just rely on my fellow Republicans, and they'll walk me through this, and they'll help. They'll orient me to Washington, and we'll get things done together. And I think somehow I managed to end up bringing up John McCain again, which I think I did last time I was here.
Yeah.
He's just one of the many examples of just how that didn't happen.
Well, look, I think this has been the wake-up call. This is why we're living through historic times, because among other things, many people, myself among them, have woken up to the fact that the people we thought were our friends and allies are not. They are in it for themselves. And when we think of people like John McCain or Mitt Romney, both of whom I voted for, or even George W. Bush, you realize they are... John Zmirak always refers to them as the Washington Generals who played the Harlem Globetrotters. Their job was to lose, to kind of pretend like we want to win and always to lose.
And I think of what a consistent dishonesty is at the heart of that. So many people like you and me who weren't in on the joke, who extended ourselves.
That's the point. This is, look, in my last book, Letter to the American Church, the last chapter is about Reagan, who actually wanted to defeat evil, actually wanted to destroy the former Soviet Union so that those people could be free. He actually believed, whereas, everybody who's for détente or whatever, at least by the time you get to the mid-'80s, they didn't really care about defeating evil. They just wanted to kind of keep a nice thing going. And you think, well, you're supposed to care about defeating evil. You're supposed to care about fighting. And Trump is one of those guys, like Reagan, he, to some extent, like Nixon. I mean, he actually is a simple person who believes, corruption is bad. We have to fight to win. Freedom is good.
How much they've been through his underwear drawers. They've turned over every file cabinet in every location. What have they got?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I mean, who could stand up to that besides you and me, of course? But we're all born in Queens, you, me, and President Trump. So that's the kind of guys we are.
That's correct.
But most of America is not, on that level.
Well, that's what's so fascinating to me is that when you said about Ron DeSantis, I think the reason people are so animated and passionate in supporting Trump is because they see what hell he's been put through. When you think about the lawsuits that have come against him, you think, why would they be going after him like this? What are they afraid of? What are they so afraid of that they will do anything. They would be thrilled to put a bullet in his head. But short of that, they're going to do everything else they can do. And I think your average American says, why would they do this? What are they so afraid of? They must be afraid of something. And they are.
They certainly are. And it is the outsider thing more than anything else. And, you bring up Reagan, that was the shock to the system. Because the era of good feelings, the second era of good feelings, you might call it, the 50s, 60s, even Nixon, they hated Nixon. Watergate was entirely about the House Un-American Activities Committee and nothing else.
Okay, I just read a book by Ben Stein. He was on this program. Oh. Ben Stein wrote a beautiful book. I'm going to have him on again.
Well, he loves Nixon.
About Nixon, and it's called The Peacemaker. And he says that. In other words, he talks about how
I learned everything from
it
Ben
was
Stein.
an absolute media coup d'etat. And they act like Watergate was a thing. Watergate was nothing. It was people coming after someone because they hated his guts, because he dared to stand up to Alger Hiss, who was a communist spy, like an actual communist spy. But the left, they dig in their heels. They don't care. They're going to fight their enemies. We're talking right now to Ron Coleman. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking to Ron Coleman, who is a lawyer with the Trump campaign. Yeah, we're talking about the hatred, this deep-seated hatred for Trump that basically says all the rules are out the window. We will do anything and everything to keep him from getting the reins of power. So they are willing to subvert the will of the American people, which I am sure they did in 2020 and really did during his presidency. They're scared to death of we the people. They're scared to death of America on the vision of the founders.
It's more than, right, and it's more than stealing an election, because that's almost an American tradition. What the hell,
Not quite, but we don't have time to argue. Go ahead. Yeah.
It is nonetheless true that every norm, every institution that we once thought we could rely on has thrown out. I mean, the idea of using state and local prosecutors to go after a former president of the United States, it's mind-boggling, out the window. Nothing matters, and it is that yes, Nixon was a shock to the system. They took care of him, and he was such a good citizen, and he was such a good American. He said, listen, for the good of the country, I'm going to step down.
Well, he did it twice. He did it in 1960
well,
when he was beaten by the fraudulent, the JFK
That's the
and
tradition
company
I'm talking about.
who tore away the election from him, and he nobly said, "We'll let it go." But again, in '74, rather than tear the country, Bill Clinton wouldn't have resigned and didn't resign. But Nixon, the honorable statesman that he was, who loved America, he did. He cared about America more than himself.
And Reagan was a next level threat to them, and I remember liberals at that time. They couldn't believe, it was Pauline Kael redo. I don't know anyone who voted for Reagan. How could this possibly happen? It happened.
People aren't going to get the reference. Pauline Kael in 1972. This is the film critic for The New Yorker, and a dyed-in-the-wool New York liberal. Famously said, I don't know anyone who didn't vote for McGovern. And that is the point. They live in a bubble where they're never hearing dissenting opinions. The truth will not get in. And so this is where we are. It's the cultural elites despise these populist America-loving, leaders.
And that's the thing. They don't hate Trump at all. They don't really care about Trump at all. He is merely a target.
Yeah.
I mean, I've lived in New York or in the New York area my entire life. Donald Trump, when he got the nomination, all of a sudden I started hearing Donald Trump racist. Racist. This guy's been in the real estate business in New York my entire life, and I never, ever heard anything like. There's no way you continue as a public figure, much less have the career or the celebrity. His name was known as it was a catchword for gaudy, wealthy success. It had nothing to do with him. He was merely the receptacle for it, and we weren't ready. We were not ready.